Let's begin with the concept of Trinity as Communio in the Theology of Gisbert Greshake. By referring to Communio, we have introduced the category that more than any other expresses the heart of Gisbert Greshake theology and which finds its source and its apex in Trinitarian theology. This concept was developed in contrast to the traditional doctrine of processions, which according to Greshake made it difficult to maintain the equality of the three divine persons because of its tendency to make the entire Trinity descend from the Father. It is a concept born in a culture dominated by unitary thinking. The Father, in his innascibilitas, would remain a unity untouched by plurality. The doctrine of processions reintroduces the idea of an intra-divine generation that reveals a sort of subordinationism. In developing his criticism of processions, Greshake comes to outline the image of the Trinitarian Communio, conceiving it as the most suitable to account for the three in the one and their perfect equality. He writes about this: "We propose this thesis. To say that God is triune means to affirm that God is that communio in which the three divine persons realize in a mutual trialogical play of love the one divine life as mutual self-communication. From a logical point of view, it is not necessary to resort to a substantial unity before the mutual communal play of the three persons, nor to a unity realized in the Father and communicated by him to the other two persons. The communio, as a mediation in the process of unity and multiplicity, is rather the original and indivisible reality of the one divine life, which carries within itself the different moments of implementation of the single mutual event of communication and therefore carries within itself both unity and multiplicity." Greshake considers this concept the most suitable to express intra-divine relationships based on a conceptual association. The term, in fact, refers to two figures. The first of these refers to people who live behind a common barrier in a specific living space that binds them to a common life. The second, instead, refers to the idea that those who live in a community are required to provide mutual service according to which each person fulfills himself simultaneously as an individual and as a member of a communio. The two proposed images highlight a movement in which unity develops from multiplicity, which does not leave the latter outside itself, but includes it. It is precisely in this mediation of unity and difference that Greshake sees the most effective analogy to indicate divine life. What is distinct, different, or alien from oneself is composed into unity through participation in something common, without thereby dissolving the differences. It allows us to account for a plurality of divine persons that does not cancel the unity of God without resorting to modalist or subordinationist concepts. The communion that is realized in the Trinitarian life should not, however, be thought of in the same way as human communion, which is imperfect due to the finiteness of creation, where despite all efforts, an essential difference remains between the individual members of the common life itself. In God, things are different. The unity of God is rather a relational unity of love, original and superior to any understanding in which the three persons communicate to each other the one divine life, and in this exchange distinguish themselves and at the same time manifest themselves as one thing in the highest possible degree. God's unity is therefore a unity between three persons that is in itself original, in which one cannot seek an ontological or logical preuse. The divine essence is precisely the one substance of a love so perfect that each of the three persons is one with the others, and that where one person acts, the others act too. According to Greshake, it is perfect union of love. In stating this, he again speaks by analogy. In fact, the theologian notes how in human love, there is a mutual interiorization on the part of the lovers who become, so to speak, a part of their partner, albeit imperfectly because their mutual difference never allows the lovers to become one. In his absolute superiority, God manages to bring the unity of love to its perfection, ensuring that, despite personal distinctions within themselves, the three are one and vice versa. The divine essence is therefore the communio. The unity is not given alongside the divine persons, but in their perichoretic exchange itself, in what happens between them. The Father realizes his own being by giving himself totally to the Son and thus possessing his own divinity as given, and thus receives his own Father being from him. The Son realizes it by receiving himself entirely from the Father and giving him glory. The Spirit realizes it to the extent that he receives himself within the relationship between Father and Son as the third and at the same time glorifies both. Thus the three persons in God have no autonomy against the others, but only from one another, with the others, and in view of the others. Using a poetic image, Greshake defines the Trinitarian event as an eternal rhythm of love, a love that is lived in a perfect way and of which the individual persons are rhythms, that is, specific figures of realization of this unitary event. Each of the three persons, including the Father, comes from the others and is oriented toward the others. For this reason, in the definition of God as communio, processions and research on the ontological foundation of the Trinity, which privilege unity to detriment of differentiation and the equal essence of the persons, are rendered superfluous. Communio itself is the divine essence in which unity is guaranteed by the perichoretic exchange between three divine persons, by the one and the same love that is realized in three forms. Considering this concept, Greshake believes that the sentence in the first letter of John, God is love, becomes clearer. If perfect love is realized in the union of the three persons, John's assertion finds its clearest explanation precisely in the light of the concept of intra-divine communio. God is the very embodiment of that love that unites in difference. By saying this, one could deny the possibility of there being anything before. In light of such a thesis, in fact, Greshake denies that there could be anything prior, anterior to this event of love. To those who ask about the constitution of this perichoretic union, Greshake responds that innascible in God is the entire complex texture of the interpersonal event of love, the unity of the event in the trinity of its moments of mediation. At this point, the question remains as to why there are precisely three persons in God. In the common human conception, love is between two people, who, however, are not sufficient to represent perfect love. The perfection of love requires going beyond the couple to avoid a selfish closure. Perfect love, which gives the greatest joy, to be truly such requires a third party to whom it can open this delight. This openness to the third, this overflowing towards another, allows a common we to be established in which love is truly realized in a perfect way, thus avoiding egoistic narcissistic limitations. In this regard, Greshake proposes the analogy with familiar love, where the parents' mutual feeling is elevated by their shared love for their child, who in turn turns to the parents with equal love. Therefore, it is not the I-you relationship, that is to say the dialogical, that is the fundamental element of true love, but rather the I-you, he, she, it relationship, that is to say the trialogical. Another beautiful image used by Greshake to establish an analogy of the divine communional essence with human reality is that of play. A play is a complex of relationships which does not exist without people and relationships between different people, and which plays in such a way as to be present in each player in an extremely specific way as a whole. No actor performing in a drama, no athlete playing a team game, no child playing a role-playing game. plays a part of the game. He plays it all, but not alone and not for himself. Each one develops the play totum non totaliter. In this sense, divine communio can be understood as the play of divine love. I skip now the next point, and I go to the anthropological consequences of Trinitarian Theology of Greshake. I should just say this point is very important because I think with these anthropological consequences we can correct an assertion of Immanuel Kant in the conflict of the faculties, as well as in the religion into the boundaries of mere reason. Writes Kant that Trinity doctrine is absolute unuseful, is absolute unimportant, because we can't win a moral rule through the Trinity. I think with the concept of communio we can say Kant was wrong. If we understand Trinity as communio, if we understand Trinity as this trialogical play of love between the divine persons, and if we think as Christians that God made us as an image of himself, then we can naturally win a lot of moral consequences. And that's why I think this point is very important. Okay. In the biblical text, we find a God who personally addresses single men. God's personal calling by name to specific individuals and not to a community in general reveals the idea of the person as a unique and unrepeatable being. This process of individualization is radically expressed in the actions of Jesus, who expressly calls individuals and always addresses individuals in his miraculous actions and in his invitations to follow him, bypassing, so to speak, social conventions. If truly the image of God and the image of man correspond in a very closed way, and if God who questions man is the Trinitarian one, it follows that man must become Trinitarian too. With the concept of intra-divine communio, it was established that God is in himself a relationship, and that it is this relationship that realizes the being person of God. Likewise, man's personhood, as corresponding to that of God, who created him in his own image, is not primarily characterized in a solipsistic manner, but rather by his relationship with others. One becomes a person in the full sense through mutual free recognition in being with one another and in being for one another. The other, therefore, belongs essentially to one's own being person. Such a conception of the person has practical consequences. It is not limited to simple theoretical knowledge. With this, Greshake considers the error committed in his opinion by Kant to be overcome. In contemporary society, there is little willingness to accept differences, preferring instead uniformity. It is common practice to try to cancel out the difference of others, to practice a standardization that disrespects the uniqueness of each person. A consequence of faith in the Trinitarian God is the different practice. The other, the different, becomes a value. A person whose otherness is an inescapable element. Just as divine life is a loving exchange between different persons, so must the human person be too. Diversity is the fundamental element that allows for authentic, vital exchange between people who complement and enrich each other. Following the rhythm of love realized in the divine communio, in which difference is not the opposite of unity but is included in it, human beings must direct their efforts towards the attempt to realize such a communion on the creatorly level, so that the I and the you unite in a common we. Multiformity makes the achievement of unity possible through loving exchange, which is why man, in the image of the Trinitarian God, cannot fail to respect the differences between himself and others. For the unity achieved to be truly unsustainable, it must take multiplicity into account and respect it. Okay, super. I come to my conclusion. According to Greshake, the double commandment of love left by Jesus represents an exhortation to realize the Trinity in one's life through mutual recognition and help, in solidarity and coexistence. The more we recognize and love others, the more we become human, and closer we come to the love of divine communio, which represents the archetype of fully realized love. This anthropological view has consequences even also at the level of the ecological question. We can say the other is also nature. The other is the world. The other is climate. The other has made climatic changes and so on. That is, the creation itself, nature itself, has a place in the divine life as this other, and it has also for us a moral consequence. And last point, the idea of communio has a consequence also in our relationships to other traditions and other religions. Then if God is a dialogical or trialogical play of game, if God is perichoresis, and men should be perichoresis too, we can also have a new basis, a new foundation, how we discuss, how we can begin a dialogue also with other religions and with other traditions. Thank you for